right, but tell us how you really feel, Seamus. I know I'm, on a bit of a rant this morning. I'm running on coffee and anxiety and midterm pressure, so I'm a little short on time this week. Just running high. Mike Pence brings out a bit of the rage demon in us all, I hope. But we do have another story to cover, and that is pretty much ExxonMobil's manifesto against human life. I mean, there is a clear intention by oil companies more generally, but by this company to just completely end life as we know it on Earth. And it is just, the evil is appalling. Again, really the word of the day. Basically what they want to do, there's a leaked memo from Bloomberg Green that they found that there's a plan from pre-COVID, so that could change. But they want to increase their oil production with a $210 billion investment plan. Except that means that they want to increase their emissions by 17% by 2025. And so that would take their numbers from 122 million metric tons in 2017 to 143 in 2025. And they've launched these self-help emission reduction programs. But if you take a look at this graph, I mean, you could see the increase over the years, and the tiny amount of reduction that they want to do is embarrassing. I mean, the fact that they want to increase it by 21 tons and then, oh, look, we're making a couple of changes at the margins. That is so sad. And then we got to talk about scope, because most oil companies will report their scope 1, their scope 2, and their scope 3 emissions. But Exxon only does 1 and 2. So your scope 1 is your direct output. So you're putting out oil, you're putting out whatever energy. These are our direct outputs. That's our carbon coming out of that. Source 2 includes your energy demands. So if you're pulling electricity, if you're pulling coal in order to do that production, then we're going to include that into your source 2. But far, far bigger is your source 3, because source 3 is the supply chain. So from the very start, from the steel that makes your oil rigs out to the gas that gets used by your consumer at a gas station. Across that supply chain, if you add it all up, that tends to be about 5 times your scope 1 and your scope 2. And so when Exxon is talking about that 143 million number, they really mean it's far, far, far larger. And so that 21 million ton increase would actually look more like, when you talk about scope 3, 100 million metric tons. And that adds up, as the Bloomberg article says, to about the additional emissions of Greece. So you're adding another country onto the world, another developed country onto the world of industrial pollution into the atmosphere, right at the same time that, fully, probably not. But a lot of other oil companies have said, oh, we're trying to actually reduce emissions. If you take a look here, this graph shows, they could do better. But the fact that Exxon isn't even going to try to even pose as if they're concerned about the climate, and instead all of their growth projections are based on almost a doubling in oil demand over the next decade. That is insane. Oil demand's been going down, and it rightfully should. And the idea that you want to increase the consumption of oil right now, right, is everyone is talking about, and the biggest issue to voters right now, and not that Exxon cares about American voters or any of us for that matter, but the fact that this is a major issue for people, and climate is looming. I mean, it is, again, the biggest existential threat to our planet. And for them to just totally ignore it and put an extra country of emissions into the world is ignorant and destructive on a scale that I can't even begin to fathom. It really comes down to what happens when your corporate boards and your director level positions are filled by 70-year-olds who are going to die before they have to face any of these consequences, is they will impose any kind of evil on future generations. I mean, my grandkids are probably going to have a lower quality of life than I do, purely because of the evil, completely inhumane, and just the lack of humanity is shocking. But their willingness to prioritize profit margins over the future of human existence is very clear, because they know that, well, my kids can probably just fly to Mars with Elon Musk and I'll be dead before then, so it's not my problem. And so while we can't see the actual memo itself, from the way that the Bloomberg reporters describe it, it is essentially a manifesto against human life. There's this idea of the Kuznets Curve, or the environmental Kuznets Curve, which is to say that as nations grow, you have to industrialize, which means your emissions go up. And then as you get richer, you'll get cleaner energy, and then it'll go down. And then you'll become totally environmentally sustainable. And we are seeing China try to move towards that, because they have been probably the biggest culprit in pollution growth. But they are starting to make an effort. Is it enough? Absolutely not. But really, very few countries other than maybe Germany and a couple others are truly making a drastic enough move to try and actually save the planet. But the fact that the U.S. is continuing on this path, that U.S. oil companies are showing complete disdain for the future of human life, is living proof. The U.S. itself is living proof. If the most wealthy nation in history wasn't able to ride down that Kuznets curve in time, how exactly do we plan global development of other continents at this point to the level that our country is at by ever being able to sustain human life on this planet? Because it is impossible. It is impossible if we try to industrialize in the way that other countries have, and we don't actually exert external pressure. I mean, you can see the U.S. does not just automatically bring down emissions. You have to apply pressure. And the pressure has to come from people, and it has to come from climate organizations. And if we are not involved in that coming next year, we do not have time to waste. There is just no time to waste. But I want to close with a point about corporations and about the climate more generally. Because Exxon's total disdain for our future is not driven by somehow the inhumanity of Darren Woods, although I do not doubt his inhumanity, to be clear. But it is much larger than that. Because if you replaced him with somebody else, the same exact incentives apply, the same exact bonuses apply, the same exact dividend payments apply to the board of directors, and nothing would change. It's just like if you talk about bankers. Everyone says, if you put better people in there. No, it's the system itself. It's the people working those jobs have to make a living somehow. Does Darren Woods have to make a living doing what he does? No. I still don't doubt the complete ethical and moral depravity of these people. But they're driven by something a lot larger. And the system of capital, the way it stands today, has no accountability to communities. It has no accountability to the future. And you know full well as I do that ExxonMobil is never going to face consequences for the massive damage that they're going to try and do to the climate, that God knows how many millions of people that will kill over the years as a result of their ignorance now. And that's a greater point here, is that corporations have no accountability to the people. They have no worker control. They exploit their labor. And all they do is slowly but surely, a lot more than slowly, destroy this planet. And if we do not find a way to reorganize the way that these corporations work, to have them more accountable to communities, to have them run by workers and not by CEOs who have no connection to the real world and to the real world consequences of their actions, we are headed for planetary doom. Well, it seems to be a growing pattern here that we end on a pretty dark note, but what can I say? These are dark times. But thank you so much for watching episode 2 of Social Point. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SocialPointPod. The Spotify and Apple Podcast links will be below. And if you get a chance to listen to the podcast format, that would be great. Or follow us there and subscribe on YouTube, wherever you're watching this. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys on Monday. Take care of yourselves.